I'm calling this meeting to order. This is the Public Safety and Human Services Committee held on Tuesday, June 18th, commencing at 4:30 p.m. Council members in attendance are Council President Kritzer, Council Member Nueva Camina, Council Vice President Forsyth, Council Member Anderson, and online we have Council Member Fields and Council Member Stewart, and myself, Council Member Salahuddin, as the presiding officer. There are 3 items on the agenda officially and 1 additional item that was added that we will be discussing as well, and we will reflect the agenda on that item as well later on. But the first item is the ordinance amending Redmond Municipal Code 4.20 Civil Service, and we have Deputy Chief Ami Quiriconi presenting.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate being here. Council, today I'm presenting an ordinance that's aimed at updating the Redmond's Civil Service Code to include language to allow for lawful permanent residents and recipients of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals to apply for and be hired for any of our civil service positions. This update's crucial to align with our city's commitment to fostering a diverse and inclusive workforce and ensuring compliance with recent changes in state law regarding civil service employment practices. Civil service plays an important and vital role in ensuring that firefighters and law enforcement officers are recruited through an open competition, they're hired and promoted based on merit, and that any demotion, suspension, or removal from office or discharge is justified by cause. These laws uphold the principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability in public service recruitment and employment practices. The current Civil Service Code, which was adopted in 2011 under the qualifications of applicants, limits the eligibility for civil service positions and our public safety positions to only U.S. citizens. However, state laws were changed in 2018 to allow for the hiring of lawful permanent residents in police officer and firefighter positions and other administrative roles. Most recently, the statute was changed again this year to include the DACA recipients, with the new provisions taking effect actually June 6th of this year. Equal opportunities for qualified individuals, regardless of their citizen status, are essential to ensuring fairness and equity in public service recruitment. Lawful permanent residents and DACA recipients bring valuable skills and talents that can significantly enhance the effective delivery of our public safety services, especially in a culturally diverse community like Redmond. Removing barriers to employment for lawful permanent residents and DACA recipients aligns with the principles of fairness, equity, and inclusion, ensuring that the fire and police departments recruit the best suited individuals from the widest pool available from our community. This ordinance aims to enhance the efficiency, effectiveness, and diversity of the Redmond Fire and Police Departments, and by embracing these changes, we not only uphold our city's commitment to equality, but we also pave the way for a more inclusive workforce that reflects the diversity of our community. So we are proposing that we add these code revisions to the consent agenda for the July 2nd business meeting with the effective date of June 6th to coincide with the updated state law. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Not a question, just comment. Deputy Chief Quiriconi, I'm absolutely thrilled at today's agenda reading over the content of it. There's a lot right now around what's facing our families that are DACA, specifically the Latino community in Washington State. We are the fastest growing demographic in the state right now. And to be able to say that Redmond is paving the way to where we've got opportunities here is phenomenal. We already had it in the state, and I know that this was an issue. We read it in a content where this has been an issue here in Redmond locally, and it's been impacting us recently.
Yep.
So to be able to have an opportunity to move forward is really great. One of the demographics also, like the majority of DACA are women. And that, I just love how it tees it up for the next item on our agenda, which I won't steal any thunder just yet. But to know that specifically that's where we're making the headway for, and knowing the demographic that I'm hopeful to see increase, and then also just addressing that, we've got a significant wage gap, specifically with Latinas, and doing our bit here at the City of Redmond to help alleviate some of that. So thank you for the work that you've done and for all of the leadership with fire across the board. and happy to see this on our consent agenda.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you do bring up a good point that I will say that we currently do have a candidate in our entry-level firefighter pool who had been discharged from consideration at another agency because they don't have the same code amendments that we're bringing in, and because they weren't a U.S. citizen, but they were actually in our pool. We don't know how they'll actually end up finalizing in the testing, but it's nice to know that we don't have to withdraw them right now because of something that we can update today.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council Vice President Forsyth.
Not much more needs to be said after Councilmember Nueva Camina's comments, but I'll just happily say that I'm very excited to support this and glad that you all brought this forward and that we can be doing our part to make sure that everyone has equitable treatment in our city.
Cool.
Council President Kritzer.
I won't repeat, but I will say I'm very also supportive. One very small question is I noticed in the amendment that is proposed, it says must be a citizen of the United States of America, comma, or a lawful permanent resident, comma, or a deferred action for childhood arrivals recipient. And I'm just wondering, do we need 2 ors, or could we cut one of the ors if it's a list? It seems like there's the word or appears twice, and whether we need that extra or in there.
I don't have a
like
strong
legally,
grammatical
or
opinion of
if
that.
that's- yeah.
Yeah.
If that was just because we added an additional thing and didn't cut the first or, would just be a question. But otherwise, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer to that. I don't feel like I said grammatically, yes, we could probably strike the other or in there, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
I would just think that, because later we might have to clean it up.
Yeah.
Perfect. Anything else from council? If not, I think we are good to move this to the July 2nd consent agenda.
Excellent.
you.
Thank you.
And then the next item, also Deputy Chief Kurikoni, an ordinance amending Redmond Municipal Code 2.52 in the fire department.
Yep. So this ordinance is aimed at revising the fire code, which is 2.52, to replace all instances of gendered language with non-gendered language. Again, this is an initiative driven by our city's commitment to inclusivity in alignment with the core values of respect, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which the fire department cares very much about. The current fire department code, which was adopted in 1969, reflects an era when the use of masculine nouns and pronouns in a generic fashion was actually standard practice in the English language. This period also perpetuated gender roles that limited the perception of who could serve as a firefighter, often excluding women from consideration. And it was during the 1970s, spurred by movements like the women's rights movement, that society began to challenge some of these norms and ideas. The truth is that the history of female firefighters dates back centuries, with the notable pioneers like Molly Williams, who's known as the first recorded firefighter in 1815 after she was freed as a slave in Manhattan. Chief Nancy Allen furthered the legacy in 1931 as she organized volunteer firefighting efforts and eventually became the world's first female fire chief in Cedar Hill, Rhode Island. Judith Livers broke new ground in 1974 by becoming the first woman hired as a career firefighter in Arlington County, Virginia, 5 years after this ordinance was adopted, despite facing significant challenges and discrimination. And Brenda Berkman's landmark lawsuit in 1977 against the New York Fire Department for discriminatory hiring practices paved the way for her and other women to join the ranks of FDNY. Today, there are over 90,000 female firefighters in the United States, constituting less than 10% of the overall firefighting force, but steadily increasing. Our own fire department proudly includes 16 women in uniform positions, among them a battalion chief and a medical services officer, which is also at the same rank as a battalion chief, a medical services officer, which is equivalent to a captain, and also a lieutenant. As the highest ranking woman in our department, serving as a deputy chief, I'm proud of our department's commitment to diversity and inclusion, and we're poised to welcome our next fire chief somewhere, maybe within our ranks or through our future recruiting efforts, ensuring that our leadership reflects the talents and capabilities of our firefighters. So by updating our fire code to utilize gender-inclusive or non-gender language, we honor the contributions of all of our firefighters and reaffirm our commitment to creating an inclusive and respectful environment within the Redmond Fire Department. So we're again asking for council's support of this ordinance as a vital measure in advancing our city's values of equality and fairness in public service, and to add it to the consent agenda on the business meeting on July 2nd as well.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from council? Council Vice President Forsyth.
Really excited to see this one come forward. Councilmember Anderson and I actually, when I first got on council, worked on revising our council rules to remove all gendered language. So I'm hoping that the rest of city staff takes this as a cue to go ahead and look at their code and their documentation to see what gender-neutral language we need to be updating across the board. I think this is great and very happy to support it. Very happy you brought it forward. And thank you for the background on women and non-gender folks in fire service. That was great.
Great. Councilmember Stewart?
Thank you so much, Deputy Chief. I really appreciate you bringing this forward and your entire team's leadership on this matter. I did want to ask maybe a little bit more directly in the course of working on this code update, if you all uncovered other parts of the code or related code that maybe are still on the to-do list. Inspired by your good work, I poked around in a few places in chapters related to this one of our code. But to your knowledge, are there other chapters you uncovered that also need to go through this process?
No, I actually did go through it to make sure that we hadn't picked anything. There'd been some other amendments that replaced words like firemen with firefighters. The particular section that we're updating exclusively express the fire chief as he, him, his. But through the rest of the ones that are related to us, I hadn't seen anything, but I didn't read the entire municipal code for any other departments. So I'll leave that to them.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Nueva Camina?
I think that it's probably no secret at all to anyone that I am absolutely thrilled over the moon about this, even just knowing the slightest bit of my background. And I'm not going to overstep an opportunity to have it on the record how thrilled I am with this. Back about 5 lifetimes, I was the first woman Navy-wide with my specialty. And in historically held by men, everything was his. So to see this, and there was an argument that would say, well, it's a general thing, and it's generally, and that most women would take that we know that it means us too. And I took a document and I rewrote it, and everywhere where it said he, him, I said she, hers, and it hit completely differently. So even to take that out to where we're inclusively saying us when it's an us is such an absolute huge win. I also took a look at kind of when this is going to be put in place. And it's 5 days after it's signed, which we expect it to be signed on July 2nd, which would then have it put in place right around my birthday. And while I know that that's not intentional, I'm just going to take it as though this is my birthday present.
You're welcome.
So thank you.
Perfect. Any objections to seeing it on consent on July 2nd? Great. Thank you, and we will see you on July 2nd.
Thank you.
The next item is from Police Chief Darrell Lowe and Deputy Chief Brian Coates. It's the Lake Washington School District 2023-2024 School Community Resource Officer Contract Agreement.
Good afternoon. Thank you. What we submitted for you is the interlocal agreement between the Lake Washington School District and the Police Department for the Community Resource Officer, formerly known as the SRO. This is essentially the contract that allows us to be paid for services provided for this particular school year. The constraint or time constraint that we have on it in order to meet the school district's budgeting timeline and requirements. It requires approval and authorization by August 31st, and we're asking that it be moved to consent on the July 2nd business meeting. Also attached to this particular memo was the standard operating procedures from the school district, and that is what caused the delay in bringing this forward in a more timely manner. But this was the standard operating procedures were developed by the school district and their various, I'll say, constituents over a period of time as they change from SRO to CRO and what those obligations and expectations were. And then just as a reminder, this is a contracted service that we provide to the school district. So they essentially get to establish the scope of work after reviewing the operating procedures. I'll say the police department, we're fine with it. We believe that we can continue to meet the expectations of the school district through this program as long as they continue to request those services and have the funding for it.
We just put together a quick slideshow. We got some time on this agenda today to just show the level of activity provided by our community resource officer.
So I'll just high-level overview for the public. So this is a forward-facing dashboard. So if anyone is interested in what activities the community resource officer is actually performing at the schools, this is forward-facing. It is searchable, filter, et cetera, based upon what interests or things the community may be interested in looking at. And then the second slide on there is just overall for the entirety of the Lake Washington School District. They too have a forward-facing dashboard for all of their campuses within their district that includes the information and data from Redmond, separate and apart from the City of Redmond's dashboard or the police department's dashboard. And then call for service, the SRO has been extremely busy this particular year. We've seen a 12% increase in calls for service in this particular school year. Went from 175 to 196 calls for service. Council President.
Just a quick question on that. So what's included in calls for service?
Just about anything the school district asks of the community resource officer. So it could be specific responses. It's also CPS referrals. The majority of those are handled by the community resource officer. It could be other interactions on campus. I'll point out both for council and the public. The police department does not participate or engage in any disciplinary matters involving the school. That is exclusively the school district's purview and responsibility. So it would be, I'll say, primarily the Child Protective Services referrals. And the very last slide, there were 3 instances this year where students were assaulted on campus, and at the request of their parents, that information was forwarded to the prosecutor's office. So those constitute arrests. But I want to be very clear, there was no student handcuffed, arrested, or walked off of campus by a Redmond police officer. But the assaults were of such a nature that their parents, within their authority as parents, wanted prosecution, and thus the cases were forwarded to the prosecutor's office.
Thank you. And just for clarification, so included in calls for service, if we look at the slide before, there's a bunch of activities listed like traffic or safety assessment or special event at school. Do those count as call for service as well? Is that all rolled up?
Yes, so any interaction that the CRO has school-related or on campus gets categorized, as a call for service. So like the traffic things when there are traffic backups at, drop off and pick up, or at the high school when there are issues with student drivers in and around neighborhoods, that call would go to the CRO, and then she would respond and handle it, as well as events, assemblies, classroom teachings, et cetera. So when you think of call for service, you think of a police response. Well, in this case, it is a police response, but it's not just police-related or criminal-related matters. It's everything within that, I'll say, community or environment of the school.
Thanks.
Great, and I believe that was all the slides in the presentation for this. Perfect. Any other questions from council? Council Vice President Forsyth?
Yeah. So in prior versions of this, we've seen a head count related to this budget amount. Is there still a head count? Is it still 3? I know we've talked about this a lot in the past.
So this is I'll say this is not germane to our general fund budget. This is the interlocal agreement between the school districts. So basically, we are providing the professional service. So this is a reimbursement for the staff time. As far as what we have allocated, we have one school resource officer. Yes, there were 3 school resource officers as part of prior budgets, but in part because of the change from Lake Washington School District and the, I'll say, construction and intent of the program, there's not a need for 3. So each of their high schools, and what they refer to as the feeder school, has one CRO assigned, and then they are assigned to all of the schools that feed into that particular high school. So it's back to that community response model, and so there's not a CRO on each campus. There's the one for all of the campuses here in Redmond.
So the reimbursement that we're looking at, is that reimbursing strictly that one head,
Yes.
as it were? And then the 2 that we had before, have they just been reassigned?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'll just add, I know we've talked about this a lot, and part of the reason that I believe that we moved to have a Lake Washington School Board joint meeting with council was a lot around this topic. I would still love to see that happen before this gets signed off on. I know that it's being asked for on July 2nd, but in reality, we could do it on August 6th, which is our last meeting before summer recess. So if at all possible, I would probably look to Council President and myself to try to see if that's even possible to get something like that on the books before that deadline. But this is definitely one topic we've talked about a lot in my time on council, where we've wanted to have a co-meeting with the school board to just kind of talk some of these things out. It seems like we're all doing the same work, but it would be beneficial for us, I think, to all get in the same room and have these conversations. So, thanks.
Councilmember Anderson?
Just curious what the change in the name, what motivated that from school
Again,
resource officer to community
this is
resource?
a Lake Washington School District program.
Okay.
So I'm sure it was driven by conversation and desires from their constituents and other groups.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Nueva Camina?
Hi, Chief.
Hi.
For the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, who drives this? Is it both, or is it Lake Washington School District?
I'll give them 51%, and I'll take 49 in the sense of we provide the service for them. We do collaborate with them on the scope of work, but since this is an existing program, it hasn't changed a lot since I've been here. There have been some changes over the last 2 school years, largely driven by, like I'll say, their constituents. There's a small but vocal minority of folks within the Lake Washington School District community that are not in support of officers on campus. So that has driven some of the changes. That was in part what led to the redrafting of the standard operating procedures. A lot of that was, like I said, driven by the school district, the school board. So much to Council Vice President Forsythe's prior comments, there's been a lot of work in both spaces. So if that meeting comes together, that may be a good thing. I just met with the superintendent this afternoon, in part not specifically about this, but just talking about both of our agreement and support, of the program and how we can continue to collaborate together, with our community, both the Lake Washington School District community and our Redmond community.
And of course, our students as well. There's an article in here, in Article 4, 1, Part B. It's talking about the option of the CRO, the Community Resource Officer, being able to be employed to coach athletics, drive a school bus, or otherwise serve the district in a capacity other than that of a CRO. So I chatted with several students from Lake Washington, Evergreen, and Rose Hill, or I'm sorry, not Rose Hill, and also Redmond, and they were really surprised at this because, keeping in mind, like, what is the role and responsibility of a community resource officer, and whether or not what that would be like to have a CRO employed as a bus driver, coaching football, and specifically from marginalized communities as to whether or not there was going to be bias that would be continued throughout. So they raised quite a bit of concern, and it was probably about, on average, 10 students from each school was what I was able to chat with. So that's why I was asking who's driving it, so then where do we direct that concern to make sure that the students have say going off of some experience as well.
So what I would say for this, I think this is a outlier. So we don't have officers that are, I'll say, working a side gig for Lake Washington School District. That is what this covers. So if they were, a football coach, bus driver, et cetera, that would be separate and apart. I think what this is trying to do is say, if they were to engage in that, that would be separate and apart from what this particular contract covers. And then whatever position, whatever paid position they may engage in, they would then be bound by whatever contract rules, et cetera. But for, Redmond Police Department employees, if they were going to have secondary outside employment, that would have to be authorized by myself. And I would not be in favor of them necessarily working, in that capacity, especially if they were the SRO. I think there definitely would need to be that separation.
But we don't have a policy on that. And this would be creating a policy in favor of them being able to do so. But we don't have a policy based on what you said that you would not be in favor of it.
Well, we do have a policy that if they engage in secondary employment, that has to be approved by the department head.
Right.
So
but that still leaves the door open for another department head other than you to approve it. So like after
not
your
for
tenure.
A police officer. Oh, yeah, but
After your tenure.
Sure.
Where this would precede it. And of course, we write policy. So then what would we be opening the door for our students of a situation that we already know exists?
Well, I would counter with if you had a police employee who was a football, wrestling, et cetera, coach that wanted to, coach the kids, that if we were to write a policy completely excluding or preventing that, we may be preventing an opportunity for a positive engagement and a positive interaction, with students. Obviously I understand the historical context, but at the same time, that does not currently exist. So that might be a feeling or a sentiment, but that's not a reality because we haven't had that here. I can't speak for the entirety of Lake Washington. There may be other circumstances where a police department employee or a CRO did do something.
Yeah, I'm not talking about any particular arbitrary officer.
Right.
I'm talking about specifically a CRO because they've got a completely different experience
different
of that
role, yes.
student. Whereas, if it's Mr. Coates, that's a completely different situation. So that's why. And again, just looking for who do we direct that conversation for? Who is the one that's driving this MOU?
So that would be the school district, it would be the superintendent or Scott Emery, and I apologize, I don't know what his official title is, but he is our primary point of contact for this particular program.
Okay, great.
I think one thing to keep in mind is this is a MOU for the 23-24 school year, and it's going to be redrafted for the next school year, so it won't live in policy forever. And matter of fact, it is constantly being updated and modified, so we're not married to this one for infinity.
Right, so just to be clear then, what we need to do for consent on this is to move it forward so that we can get reimbursed for the work that for 23-24 school year.
Correct.
And then making sure that any amendments that we have or that we'd like to see in the upcoming MOU, that we have those conversations moving forward.
Absolutely.
Thank
Yes,
you.
and if you want to send me an email with, I'll make a note of this particular section, and then we can address that. When it comes time for renewal, we can redline it and say we would, like to either remove or add the following language to it as part of that conversation.
Great, thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Council President Kritzer.
And I think to both of the previous comments, we have had some discussion around this, and obviously we've had some changes to the CRO position, even the name of what we call it. And given that this is like backward looking, and I think every time that we see it, it's always backward looking so we can get reimbursed. But to Council Vice President Forsyth's point that we're going to be talking with the school board, I don't know if we need to delay, in my opinion, this decision since it is backward looking, but maybe to say, we want to have a forward-looking conversation and potentially amending the existing MOU at some point in the upcoming year after we have the opportunity to have conversations and look at this, I think would be very reasonable, especially provisions like the one that Councilmember Nueva Camina brought up, to take a look at that and whether there's some language that we could add in there. One question that I had is that I appreciate the data that is provided via our dashboard, and great to have our public-facing dashboard so we have that transparency. I think one discussion, especially as we've moved to this new model, and I'm really interested to know how that's resonating with folks, and especially with our students. And I think we've discussed this in the past on this, is we certainly can have the data of like the number of incidents and interactions and services from our side, but can we collaborate with the school district to be able to go to students periodically and actually survey them on their opinions and interactions with the CRO, so that we can better assess any sorts of improvements to the program over time?
Yeah, we can. That would, again, I will have to defer that to the school district because it is their program, their campus, their students. I do know that a lot of the work that's being done in the background, they have, I'll say, impaneled, focus groups, student groups, parent groups to get that feedback. And there are mechanisms already in place with the program to where they do provide feedback, to us. There's even language that talks about how if there is a complaint against the CRO, how that gets handled. So it is a very collaborative process. There is not a formal mechanism currently for that feedback, but we can pass that desire on, and if they so choose to do it and provide it, then absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've discussed a bunch of different times, and just in general, as we try to respond to what we're hearing from our community and members that also are, engaged with the school system. I think that's just a key piece of the puzzle that we need. So hopefully we can bring that up in our joint meeting. But also, if you can investigate that and let us know if they have a timeline. I know at one point, a couple of years ago, when we were talking about this, they said they were going to do something like that, do some sort of survey to the school community, but I'm not sure if we've actually seen that happen.
I don't know about the survey, but I do know that there have been a number of meetings with the various stakeholders to include all of the municipalities that provide this CRO service. We were one segment of that. They did have a facilitator from the state that was kind of overseeing it. So I know something's in place. I can't tell you what the status of it is because our portion of it to this point is completed.
Okay, it'd be great if there's any report or data on that the school you can get from the school district to pass along. I'd love to see it.
Council Vice President Forsyth. Perfect. I appreciate all of the questions and the comments. I just have a few of my own, and then we can move forward. The specific section in the standard operating procedures, which again is from the district. I think this might be not for you, Chief, but maybe in the conversation with the district, is talking about the item 11, the training, and whether or not, I guess the question that might be for you is whether or not you have any input or feedback into the specific training that the school district recommends or actually mandates for the CROs, and then a conversation from our side with the district on how they actually implement and develop that training.
So the good part about it is that is actually mandated by law. So it is essentially copied and paste. So while they have the forms and they are responsible to track it, the RCW specifies what it is and how it is to occur.
Perfect. Thank you. And then the other question that I had was specifically on the data that you had shared. The community resource officer calls for service, I believe the previous slide, and the percent change, went up 30%, 31.6%, and then 12% in those subsequent years. Do we have any idea on what might be causing, increased calls for service, regardless of the category?
I think year to year, part of it is with the change in the program that everything gets captured. So I believe we have more data points included. And then given that we're talking 21, well, where's my math? Yeah, about 21 different calls you're going to have, that skew because what's the error of small numbers or law of small numbers?
And I think to further answer that question, CPS referrals, as you noted on previous slides, make up a lot of calls for service, and that was traditionally or used to be done by dedicated detectives in the family violence unit. And then just due to staffing constraints, we no longer have that unit. It's just that a lot of it, most of it, all of it involves school-age children. It falls back on the SROs, and that could account for that increase as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Nueva Camina?
And just a clarifying question or point is also to point out that our population has increased. So even though it's an increase in percentage and numbers of calls, in comparison to our population, then perhaps it's a wash? Or have we, maybe we haven't even looked at the data. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe that's not one.
Yeah, while the numbers are increased, it's just, I'll call it a course and scope of what we do. Yes, there's been more calls. Yes, our SRO is very busy, but we haven't seen something that is, I'll say, so shocking or alarming that we feel we need to make any, significant operational, changes around it.
Great, thank you. So the ask is for this to go to consent on July 2nd, and I think there was some discussion that we were okay with that since it's, backdating and getting that reimbursement, and then having that red line for what the future MOU could look like, especially with our conversation with the district. Any objection to that? Yep, Council Vice President Forsyth.
No objection, just wanting to make sure that any red line in any conversation happens well in advance.
Let's plan for it well in advance. Perfect. I think we are good to go. And then the final item is not on the public-facing agenda, but we'll make sure that we work with the clerk to get it added. It was in the agenda packet. It is a two-line update from Police Chief Darrell Lowe.
Yeah, so just a very quick update on the two-line. It has been pretty insignificant thus far. We've had about 9 calls for service. Initially, when we staffed it with 2 officers around the peak commute times, both in the morning and afternoon. As a result of the lack of activity, we will still be providing service at the morning and afternoon commute times, but we're going to reduce the staffing down to 1 officer. And then we will continue to evaluate it, as we move forward. As I've said multiple times, I don't believe we're really going to see a significant impact until the connection across Lake Washington, sometime in the future.
Thank you. Questions from Council. Council President Kritzer.
So when we last talked about this, you had said that we were going to be looking at an ILA or an agreement with Sound Transit, but I don't think that actually came back to us for a decision.
Funny you should mention that. So we've been going back and forth with Sound Transit. Clearly they have some organizational challenges with everything they have going on. We just got back the contract format today, which we resubmitted again this morning. We did maintain our place in their legal queue for the approval of that particular contract. So when our turn comes up, it will in fact get executed. We will bring that forward, and it will be much like this particular contract in the sense of we'll not backdating it, but we will be asking for approval of it so we can submit invoices for the work that we've done up to that point. High level, what they have allocated for the municipalities and in which the trains run through is up to $250,000 annually for police services. So, like I said, we completed it. We sent it back. We will, do the memo and bring that forward once we get it back for Sound Transit. Requesting approval to enter into that agreement and then be able to submit for reimbursement for services provided up to that point and moving forward.
And is there still any discussion, or is it now, are you moving forward with a version that is, fully uniformed police officers versus them funding our community ambassadors idea?
Yes, so that idea concept is no longer, I'll say, viable through Sound Transit. They are no longer willing to approach it from that perspective. Their, I guess, internal agreement was what I just mentioned, up to $250,000 for each of the municipalities that the train runs through. How that, and that is specific for commissioned police officer services. So it's not an option for that particular contract for any type of alternative response. Just kind of fast forward over the years as we've been building towards this. We've had conversations about a transit unit. We've had conversations about ambassadors, et cetera. From where we sit today and looking at the impact now that it's operational, that would not be a viable conversation for this budget cycle. Perhaps, maybe mid-year and moving into the next budget cycle once we get more fully operational and once we get the other two stations online, then that might be more viable. And obviously our data set right now is very limited, but with 9 calls for service and none of them being of a significant nature, it's not suggesting that that need currently exists.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Great. I think this is informational only. So if council has any other questions or wants to follow up on this, please feel free to send Chief Lowe an email. But there are no other items on the agenda. Is there anything for the good of the order? Great. Seeing none, we are adjourned.